Hello, friends. Bill here with Sports Fan Outreach. Hope you're having a good week. We're having a good one here, too. Anything to share? Anything to share? Post it up here. Let's talk about it. I'm excited. Moving forward towards Sports Fan 1000. You're going to start hearing from Alex Burt. This is for football. Hopefully Thursdays at 8 o'clock. We're looking forward to talking to him. So this, and then working on London. Show that up there as well. If you want to go to London, I'm always pitching events. I just love going to London. It's a great place. 20 million people. If you've never heard all this before, 20 million people. David knows. Been to London, and it's a fantastic opportunity. There's so many opportunities out there. You have a city of 8 or 9 million people, and there's people everywhere. They're all around the tube. They're all on their feet. You've got 300 languages spoken in London. We're preaching 8 hours a day, 10 days in a row, all over the city. It's just a phenomenal opportunity. I guess all these fun facts are facts that say, hey, man, it's worth going over there. It's really worth it. I think David would agree. Heath was there last year. And so, man, it's just an amazing opportunity. I know. And so, man, if you just want to just even the spark of an interest in going to London, then please contact me, 423-724-7500, and let's talk about it. It's so cool over there. I think the one reason I like to travel some is to get away from all the things over here, and it's really a pure place. It's really a pure time. And then when you're with 10 guys and we stay at this place, the Highbury Center, and we get up and eat together, pray together, break up into teams, go out in the city, come back, pray together, and it's just a lot of fun. And Highbury Center is a great spot for us. You get your own room, and that's really important on these long trips, so you can get rested. And but it's just great. I cannot think of a reason not to go at all. And then the games are kind of like icing on the cake. They're playing two games at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I think these things are really interesting from a human nature perspective. So human nature is really, to me, I'm going to try to use this word a little bit more and more, is that how does really life work? How does sin work in the world? What do we do as sinners in this world, which denote an important event or something that's out of the ordinary? And so, in human nature, in our day, sports are big events, and then when cities get involved, and that's important. So that means that there's a lot of attention placed on this particular location in this particular event. And so for me, at least, when you step in the middle of what the world is deeming important and bring in the gospel, bring in preaching Christ in these environments, it's more than just a regular day on the sidewalk and down the Piccadilly Circus, to use a London location. So Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was redone for these NFL games. And so you have the NFL actually has made enough of a commitment to London to have basically a singular destination for its games. And so then Tottenham Hotspur itself is got runs on the west side of it. This one road they block off, and they create this massive foot traffic, just like they do here home in the States. And you got fans. You've got English people wearing jerseys of teams they don't even know, because somehow the NFL, somebody gives free jerseys to the fans. So you see fans rolling in with jerseys from all teams, not even the teams that are playing. So what you're watching is this very important event in the life of the city of London, and we just happen to understand it's NFL. So once you get past into the depths of human nature here, it's a pretty substantial opportunity. So there's two games, and then there's a game on a Saturday on the 7th at Emirates Stadium. Emirates Stadium is there near Highbury Center. Again, you have this important place. You have this team called the Arsenal. And Arsenal is a famous team. It's always a good team. They have rabid fans, and it's a great historical location. And we were able to go to a couple of games last year, and we got one game this year. And so you're stepping into the middle. It's kind of like stepping into another world and bringing the light into this world for a moment, kind of disappearing without being all spiritual about it. But that's kind of what happens. And for a moment in time, we get to enter their world with the gospel. There's also a game at Stamford Stadium, which is down in South London on the same day. I think we're going to hit that as well. That should be fun. And then plus London being a historical city, really the center of the world, you would say, really until, World War II in a sense. And England dominating the world with its empire from what's that word? I can't think of it. Horizon to horizon, from east to west. And London was it was the center of the whole thing. And so you have the reason these people are in London is because they all came to this massive capital city that ran the world for several hundred years. And so we're standing in places. Piccadilly Circus. It's got the road coming Piccadilly Circus called Shaftesbury. And Lord Shaftesbury was a great Christian reformer in the early 1800s. And down at Trafalgar Square, named after the great naval victory of the British over the French in 1805. Lord Nelson, there's this massive statue of him there as well. So these are historical places, and they attract people. We were there last year. I think Dave and I were standing there together, and the people of Iran, at least some of them, were having this huge, huge political rally in this massive Trafalgar Square, and they were waving Iranian flags and chanting and carrying on. In a sense, we were watching a protest of the existing policies of the Iranian government. I mean, sometimes it's kind of like being in a movie set because it's just so surreal. You're standing by these old buildings, these old churches, and these old places. Buckingham Palace is probably a mile down the road from Trafalgar Square, and there we are preaching Christ in the middle of these places. It's pretty cool. And then you've got historical Christian history that's there from Wesley and Whitfield. These guys, there's a graveyard nearby Wesley's old place. It's called the Foundry, and where famous Christians are buried. I think Isaac Watts is buried there and other things. So the Christian history of England is a phenomenal. It's inspiring. The churches, the monuments, the graves, the stories. In fact, an old friend of mine, Joel Thornton, would always say that we have a Christian debt to those folks who came over from England. Of course, they brought the gospel with them. And so going to London is way more than going to a large city in this world. The historical nature, the uniqueness of the games, where we're staying, the Highbury Center's an old mission house, the 1800s. It's just a very unique experience. I think everybody that goes seems to really enjoy the time. So I want to encourage you to really pray about coming and join us for 10 days, October the 6th to the 16th, and let's keep bringing the light of the gospel over there. You know, the other thing about London is Paris is only like a 2-hour train ride away. Paris is close, and you get to Europe. If you've never been to Europe, Paris is close, Berlin is close, Italy is reasonably close. You start to see the scope of the United States, how big it is, and then so when you start to think about traveling from London to Paris to Italy to Berlin to preach and stuff, it's not that big a deal. And the trains run well over there. Transportation's easy. England's not a car country. London, no one really drives a car. Europe is not a car country in the same way the United States is. And so all of a sudden, all of this starts to open up to you. You go, wow, there's so much potential if we get over there, stay over there, and keep pressing forward. So, I want to encourage you to pray about joining us if you can. It's one of those trips that I think when you go, and you leave home, if you've never done this thing before, it just really resets, you might say, reorients your evangelistic life to be immersed in the evangelistic work for 10 straight days and all that comes with that. So contact me. Let's talk about you going as well. One of the events, speaking of that, I want to talk about, and then I'm going to bring Heath on. We're going to talk a little bit about things, is the Grey Cup in Toronto, November 16 to 19. So the same dynamic here at work. You've got this city, Toronto, that sits on this lake, massive lake, and to put it in geographical perspective, Toronto's basically across the border from Buffalo. Buffalo sits on the same lake. Toronto's across the water. I mean, these are historical places. This waterway from the lake up the St. Lawrence Riverway up to the Atlantic Ocean is really divided British North America from the colonies several hundred years ago. It's just not, once you see all that, to me, I find interesting depth of what happened to Canada, what happened to us, things like that. But Toronto's close by, and Hamilton is where the game is at. So Hamilton is on the west part of the lake. You can look on the map and see Hamilton's kind of like a suburb of Toronto. And so what we have before us at the Grey Cup are a wonderful opportunity to reach three places. One, Hamilton itself. And the game is there at Tim Horton Field. And Tim Horton was a hockey player in Canada, and there's this massive chain of coffee shops in Canada called Tim Hortons. And so they're one and the same. And so the game is back at Tim Hortons Field, and they're going to have events in Hamilton. So we're going to reach out into Hamilton as well. Toronto, a great city for foot traffic. It is probably at least top 10, if not top 5 or 6 cities I've ever been to with foot traffic. So we're going to go to Toronto. Niagara Falls, we visited back in late May, and it's like a big Gatlinburg, one of these tourist cities. There's tons and tons of people that come to Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, and so we can preach there as well. So what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to have a really big impact on this region, on this event, and try to push forward into Canada with the gospel. I want to encourage you to come join us. You get a passport. If you don't have one, give me a ring and we'll talk about how to get that done, and really try to engage the Canadians there to preach with us, and let's reach that nation as well. I was just talking to Bob McCrary, and I think one thing that we fail to do, I'm not being critical here, is we fail to take the initiative. We fail to push forward. We fail to really realize, hey, if we push forward, we win. When we've got to sort of develop this mindset, we're going to go into new territory or go back and reclaim old territory, however you want to think about it. And this is what I'm describing. Let's push back into Toronto, into Canada, and it's just right across the border. So it's easy. It's not complicated. It'll be a lot warmer than it was in Saskatchewan last November as well, Lord willing. So put that on the list as well. So let's talk to Heath a minute about a couple of things. Keep your finger in the text, George Whitfield and so forth. So hang on a second. Heath, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Bill?
Good. Speaking of cold weather, is it getting cold yet, or y'all still got a heat wave like everybody else?
Yeah, we're getting the heat wave. It's climbing up there, and I think by the middle of the week, it's preparing me for the Music City Grand Prix because it's going to be in the mid-90s.
There you go. That's exactly right. Amen to that. Well, cool. So tell me about that first. We've got, man, we're still getting registrations. It must be over 30.
Yeah.
You're a team leader, right?
Yes, sir.
Talk about that. Tell me why that's important, why that's fun, why you want to go.
Yeah, it's become, I think, one of the largest SFOI outreaches. I mean, the Super Bowl outreach is the granddaddy of them all, right? And then the Kentucky Derby continually brings about 20 to 30 people. But since IndyCart brought the Music City Grand Prix to Nashville, it's just been a great place overall. I think this year is going to have one of the largest, registrations. Nashville is a great city. I mean, there's a lot of, I'll say transient population, but I think it's also the largest, what do they call that? Bachelorette party capital of like the United States or whatever. And they always have everything going on. Broadway Street, as some of the guys in Nashville, like John Coble and everybody know, Broadway is just where all the bars are, all the country, upcoming stars, just a whole great strip of people constantly there. You have the Country Music Hall of Fame there. And then, of course, IndyCart says, let's bring IndyCart race to already a bustling city. And it just is a great mixture of people all the time, everywhere.
It is amazing. That Broadway is an amazing place, isn't it? It's very surprising that it's that busy.
Yeah.
I don't know what's surprising, but I was surprised. And then the Bachelorette thing, that is staggering. That's not like one of these stats you hear, but you never see it. You see it, don't you?
You do. The party buses are all over the place, constantly, picking up people, and people are just riding around. Nice, David. Right. I mean, people are just riding all over the place, and there's a constant flow of people, whether they're on the sidewalks or whether they're on these party buses.
The sidewalks are really wide, which I like. They're really wide. And they actually create, I don't know what you call it. I'm sure there's a word for it. At the intersection, they sort of curve out even more.
Right.
So it gives you a great place to preach. And then the whole city has the Country Music Hall of Fame, a couple of museums down there. They really have done a great job. To their credit, you would say. There's the hockey arena down there, Bridgestone, that's attracting people down there. Right there at Second, I think, or what's the road, all of a sudden it just explodes. And and numbers of people.
Right.
Tell us about the accommodations and teachings and so forth like that.
Yeah. So the accommodations, we are at Lincoya Hills Baptist Church. A little bit of a change from the first time we were there out at a camp. I mean, it's close by. It's 10 to 15 minutes, if that, from the Nashville Rescue Mission where we park. I know Ben Grady, our leader for the outreach, works there, so we have the ability to park there, and just a couple minute walk to our ministry spots. The teaching this year is going to be a little bit different. I'm looking forward to Thursday talking to Ben a little bit more about that. But the teaching with the team leaders is we have taken texts and we are going to kind of lead almost a small group devotional and interact with everybody there with the text itself and kind of work with them and walk through how you can look to preach Christ from those texts.
Cool. Are you going to reveal the text now or till when you get
Well, the text that I've chosen is Isaiah 40, and I don't know if we'll get through all of Isaiah 40, but I'm using Isaiah 40 in different aspects because it has been quoted in the New Testament, but also Isaiah 40 itself happens to be a text that a lot of people use in different aspects or different parts of it. And what is it truly looking to communicate, and how does that help you preach Christ?
That's cool. So yeah, I got the message too that nobody liked the cot. So you're not sleeping on cots this year, are you? Is that David whining about that, or he probably liked the cot?
Yeah. Well, regardless, I think when the Kentucky Derby outreach was there and we were at the camp, I ended up buying a blow up air mattress. So that's kind of been my my go-to.
Yeah, that's you guys, man. I think David said, Bill, what we need is somebody to come along, and sort of wipe your head at night, like wipe off, make sure you're comfortable. David had his way, would have chocolates on the pillows.
I was going to say mint or chocolate on the pillow.
Why don't we just make an offer? If you like your chocolate with mint or with nuts or something. I don't know, man. It's too easy. David is bringing a bunch of guys with him. Let's see, we've got Sleep in Your Day. That's what I'm saying.
There you go.
We're reading no blow-up mattresses either. Yeah. That's cool. Well, Ben does a great job. And so you and David and Will, who else is the team leader?
That's it. David, and Will Dietrich.
I do know that David's pastor's coming, so I'll probably be on a better behavior than normal. So that's pretty cool. I think David's got a new guy or two that's registered as well. So
right.
Now, I know Brian Connell's coming down. Is Dan coming down? Anybody else?
Dan is coming down with me. And then when we move through the Waukesha/Milwaukee area, we're picking up Justin Johnson on the way down.
Great. He came last year, didn't he?
No, Justin is somewhat new to SFOI. His first outreach with us was at the Kentucky Derby.
The Derby. That's cool. Okay, that's right. Fantastic. Outstanding. Well, it should be a great time. Lord willing, it'll be a great time.
Yeah.
They need to, that's for sure. Anyway, let's talk about Keep Your Finger in the Text and just catch us up to date on that.
Yeah. So right now with Keep Your Finger in the Text, Monday nights we have Taking Reps. We are in the 3 weeks now. We've been wrestling with John 15, 1 through 17, and this analogy of I am the vine, you are the branches, abide in me, and I in you, and apart from me you can do nothing. As part of that text, and we're working through the organization, and it's been a good discussion. It's been a discussion revolving, what is the intentionality of this? Because it can kind of seem like where you have a text where there's a command and then a negative consequent to that command, that all of a sudden it's a matter of you're saved, you're not saved. This is how you know you're saved. This is how you know you're not saved. And it's a little bit different, nuanced in John 15. And that's been a great discussion of trying to reorient ourselves beyond just what we see and what is really going on. Not that it's some Gnostic aspect, but just focusing in on the text and not trying to pick apart every piece of it to try to say something that it's not. But ultimately, we have about, I think when everybody joins on Monday night, we have roughly about a dozen guys that are there. And, each and every week we keep growing deeper and deeper and deeper. And we started out with, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, I say ish, to get through a text. And I say the ish because the more we are together and the more we look at text, we start to drive a little bit deeper than a surface level to really understand it, and that takes a little bit more time.
That's good. Speaking of interpreting text, let me ask you this, and we'll talk about Tuesday night. So I was reading the other day, and I guess it's a proverb. I'm really asking if this is a way to interpret text. So it's about the adulterous woman. So it says in general, she woos the innocent guy, and what she says is basically, I made my offerings. So there's some religious connotation there. There's some like, I'm a righteous person. My husband won't be home for a while, and then so come on in and we'll do what we're going to do. And I was thinking about it. I said that could be really a temptation to unbelief. Like, and if you look at religions, that's what they say. Hey, come on over here, naive one. We make our offerings. We're righteous people. The judge, God, is not coming. So come on in and let us do what we do in our cult or religion. Do you think that's a legitimate extrapolation from those kind of verses, or is that a little too spiritual or Gnostic or something like that?
Well, ultimately the proverb focuses on the adulterous woman, I think primarily from a physical standpoint. There's this aspect of, this physical aspect and guarding against the temptation, I think, of adultery itself. But adultery is also used as a kind of like an analogy for Israel as they were going after foreign gods as well. So, you do have this aspect that you could use an illustration such as, there's these other things that charm and woo you and lead you into a spiritual adultery away from the one true and living God.
So you think that's a legitimate thing to say? So
I would say, yeah, there is a lesson to be learned from that. I think more specifically to what's being given, it is physical.
right.
But I think it does also have a little bit of an element, without going Gnostic or trying to abide outside the text. There's just this aspect overall of be careful of these charming things that will woo you away from,
Right.
godliness.
Well, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Well, I think that's interesting to think about, just interpreting text when you go back to, like, getting sidetracked here, what happened in the garden, Genesis 3, what really was the implication, and then we see them cover themselves up in their righteousness. I think it's, we understand man does that. He's been wooed by this idea and believes he is righteous and has paid his debt. I think it's fascinating. In other words, something you might preach to undermine someone's confidence in their own self-righteousness.
Right.
That's what I'm driving at. Do you think that's a legitimate application, or at least a illustration you could use in natural life to undermine someone?
I think it would be, yeah, kind of almost like a cautionary tale of an application to say, watch out.
Right.
Watch out for these themes that are charming you away.
It's pretty interesting. You read the Psalms and the Proverbs enough, there are very specific words in there about the ways of the wicked and the ways of the righteous. The Psalm and the Proverbs are not confusing, and that's for sure. So anyway, tell us about Tuesday nights. How's that going?
Yeah, Tuesday nights are going well. We are in the summer in Exodus, so we are working with an Old Testament narrative, and we're tonight at where is the gospel. So I mean, for us as open air preachers, I'm sure this is the pinnacle where people are like, all right, now we're getting to the gospel. We're getting somewhere because we're gospel preachers. And it's fascinating with Exodus, because Exodus itself, I think, is one of those books that sets the stage for a lot of the other themes, a lot of the other analogies, a lot of the other prophecies, where we have the tabernacle in there. We have the institution of the priesthood in there. We have the temple in there. We have the wilderness. We have exile. We have the Exodus event. But not just the Exodus event, because most people think Exodus is, oh, that's the event where they're coming out of Egypt. But there's also this theme that carries through, that God delivers his people, from their enemies. But yet at the same time, there's also this exile element. So, when they grumbled and they complained about trusting in God, God sent them into exile. He sent them away from their promised fulfillment because of their disobedience. So you have all of these aspects going on, and all of those carry on even into the New Testament, but they find their ultimate fulfillment in Christ.
That's good. Is everybody tapping in, getting the big picture?
Yeah. It's it's great to see, I would say, eyes opening. And what I mean by that is, just sometimes the past couple of weeks we've been in organizations of text and trying to find out what's the point. And we kind of have a gist of it, but just trying to look at the Bible with X-ray eyes to glean the point is a lot different, because the things that we normally will read through and just glance over and move on, we have to kind of pause and stop and say, no, wait a minute. Something changed there. Why did it change? Because that's kind of revealing as to what God is trying to get done.
Cool. Well, good. And good. I was going to ask you about the academy. You want to talk about that at all? Or
yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, we could start to talk about it. I was waiting to see about the revelation of it, but
sure. Keep going.
So something new, in case you're going, hey, what's this academy going on? Bill and I have been talking quite a bit about how do we kind of move SFOI forward? How do we move ourselves forward as far as really diving into text? How do we come up with, this aspect that we can kind of progress to something as a result of going through Keep Your Finger in the Text? And really, as the George Whitefield program this last year was kind of a caveat to all of this. But coming up next year, you're going to hear more about this. We're going to launch the George Whitefield program, Preaching Academy. It's going to be a 2-year program, of course, not accredited, but it's going to be a 2-year program for you that are looking at strengthening and enhancing your preaching. Each year in the spring, we're going to be doing a workshop very similar to what we've done. And then throughout the rest of the year, we're going to be focusing in and spending a good 12 weeks on one aspect. So what's the point? Trying to discern the main emphasis of a text and how it breaks down. We're going to have 8 weeks of teaching where we're going to focus on examples. We're still going to have text that we're working through, much like the other workshops. We're going to have a section itself on biblical theology. So how do we focus in and ground ourselves on legitimate gospel connections? I think the second year we're going to have one that is solely on doctrine, systematic theology, and how does that play into our preaching to make sure that we're seeing doctrine right in our preaching. And then a whole aspect on persuasion and rhetoric. So how do we take all of our information, and we touch on it in our workshops, but we're going to spend focused time on it with sermon construction. How do we formulate our argument from the main argument of the text? How do we talk about illustrations and applications? And a lot of this is really going to focus in and continue down to really driving home our craft and getting better at what we're doing.
What do you think is the added advantage of doing this versus just doing what we've been doing or doing the classes every quarter?
I think the added advantage of it is we're going to take some time and spend some more focus time on some of the critical aspects that we're working through. So, for instance, the author's organization and what's the point? We spend 2 sessions on it in a normal workshop. And that's good to get your feet wet. But sometimes it's still a struggle. And to build more confidence, we're going to spend 8 weeks on working through 8 sessions, working through these aspects. So there's going to be tons of examples from poetry. There's going to be tons of examples from narrative. There's going to be lots of examples from discourse and trying to really understand what a text is saying. Or when it comes to what is the gospel, when we spend 8 weeks or four days like we did at the George Whitefield program this past year, you start to see bigger picture of the gospel throughout the Bible than you're a sinner, God's a big God, you need Christ, repent and believe. Now, is that true? Yes. Yes, that is true. But not every text is, you're a sinner, God's a big God, he's holy, you're not, Christ died, come to him. I kind of say, if that's the main crux of what God wanted us to know, he didn't need to write 66 books. He could have just said that. I'm holy, you're not, Christ is, turn to him. And we wouldn't need 66 books to determine that. So as we're preaching out texts, what is God specifically trying to get done? So that's like in the biblical theology aspect. So it's more about slowing down a little bit more, spending some more focused time. And I think the advantage with that is as well, is those who engage in this will not necessarily just take a workshop and say, okay, let me go off on my own. Because and that's perfectly okay if you're comfortable doing that as well. But even if we take a look at preaching, it's not a one and done thing. If you're engaging in this craft, you need to really keep working through it to get better, honed, and we'll never arrive this side of heaven. But the goal is to be the best that we can be.
I guess you're talking, you just have to realize you're not going to attain, the journey doesn't end.
Right.
You just keep working and getting better, right?
Right.
That's what you're describing.
Right. And one of the, I think the advantages that I think we were talking about as well is building that into our leadership model of outreaches as well, where organizing a team for an outreach also becomes the avenue where if you have engaged in the process of understanding, how to work through text and everything, you can then, as your team operates pretty much independently as itself during preaching, you can kind of sit back and listen in. And your focus is listening in, providing feedback, providing coaching, really helping work with your team to be more focused in their preaching.
I'll tell you about what happened in Seattle. This is about preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Pat Haggard did a great job. This pastor came down, John Smith, and I cannot remember exactly what he was saying, but he was preaching a very Christ-centered message, talking about in a way the love of God and so forth. He was definitely talking about that, and it was I was there. Mason Goodnight was there, and I mean it was a great sermon.
Mm-hmm.
There was no question about it. And this guy comes walking out. It was such an odd moment. This is my point here: is preaching a good sermon. When you preach a good sermon out there, then you're going. It just has this ability to get your attention. You start listening, right? That's really my point.
Yeah.
So this dude comes walking up. He goes, "Tell him about the love of God." And so it's like Mason and I were there, like that's what he's been talking about. And like we all knew he wasn't listening.
Right.
He just came up to yell at Pastor Smith, and then the rest. I won't tell you what happened after. There wasn't anything bad after that, but he and Mason got into a little bit. The guy was really like, "Hey," he got really upset. And I'm like, "Hey, man, you weren't listening." It was so crazy, but the sermon was so amazing. The sermon was so amazing that's what you're after. Like preaching a sermon, it sets this and I don't know what you want to call it, spiritual environment. It gets your attention. You start listening. You're following the points, and in a sense, if you believe we're made in the image of God to respond to the word and so forth, it's going to get your attention. It's a decidedly different experience than other things. It's not the only way. We're not all defensive about it, but I think putting your hand to the plow, being a good preacher, has benefits that you really can't comprehend. The other part of that, of course, in our environment is the influence. I saw this more with Pat because we were together more, of just everything around you. There's this leavening of, how would I want to say it accurately, like the preacher with a sermon has a decidedly different appearance, so to speak, than another appearance. So we were there on Tuesday. Some guys showed up. I mean, we know who they are, but with signs, 3 signs stacked up, big old bullhorn stuff. It's such a different appearance than the preaching there, all that kind of thing. It's just I don't do what you want, but it's worth putting your hand to the plow about. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, it is. And, ultimately, I talked with Pat after I, saw some of the video clips as well. He's in Taking Reps, and just talked to him a little bit about what he preached. And he preached a lot of the sermons we worked on in Taking Reps, as it was there. And there's this decided different aspect to it that we are devoting to faithfully representing what God has intended in his word. I mean, I guess you could say it, is it the only way? No, but I think it's the faithful way. It's the faithful way because you're devoted to Scripture itself. We're not trying to, again, if this is the case, you're out there. But I would challenge you, when we start just taking verses from this section and 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 stringing along a gospel message, I'm not going to negate the fact that you're not preaching the gospel. But what I am going to challenge you to do is say, are you picking those verses because it proves your point? Or is it what was exactly intended to get done in the text?
Right.
And there's the difference. I mean, I kind of talk about this aspect of unlocking the Holy Spirit, and it sounds kind of weird, but there is something to that the full power of God's word, the full thrust of the power and the emphasis of the text is when we look to handle the text rightly. Yeah. It has all of its emphasis, it has all of its thrust, it has all of its power per se, and we're not having to come up with any of this. We're just exposing what's already there, and how do we communicate it effectively to those who need to hear it.
That's good. You want to comment on Charles's comment there? You see what he said?
I did. Charles, I firmly agree with you. Exodus 32, 1 Corinthians 10. I mean, Exodus itself is quoted numerous times in the New Testament. And I think to the aspect of the balance is, and maybe you can clarify that if you're still listening, but the Old Testament is what the New Testament writers and authors had. It's what Paul had, it's what Peter had, it's what John had, it's what the disciples had, and they interpreted the Old Testament, and as they interpreted it, found its ultimate fulfillment in Christ. So there is an element to the Old Testament that it is grounded in biblical history. We're not negating that. But how does it find its fulfillment, especially with the prophecies or some of these types that are more dimly shown, clearly and brightly are magnified in the person and work of Jesus Christ in the New Testament, because they're anticipating Christ as its climax.
Yeah, that's what he came to do, reveal God to us. And you start to see all that. That's what the beauty is. It really, it's all right there. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Anything else to share?
No, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to see us to roll out the Preaching Academy, and I think it's going to have some impacts for you as I guess you could say, as a participant in it. For those that are in the George Whitefield program, you'll probably be able to get through it in maybe about a year and a half. Because next year's George Whitefield program is going to be like the last session of 2025. But we're going to work through it, and Lord willing, that it'll have some great impact on us as open air preachers and continue to move forward.
Cool. All right, man. Don't you have a big event this weekend, or was it last weekend in Green Bay?
Last weekend. Okay. Dwayne, well, you talking about the fair?
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
The fair?
Yeah, okay. So the Fond du Lac County Fair was going on. Dwayne hosted that. I unfortunately was not able to be a part of it. I know Justin Johnson from Waukee was up there for it, but the fair was 4 days. That there was a booth on the fairgrounds and a great opportunity to pass out tracts and interact with, the fairgoers that are going around, and if even need be, some I guess you could say crisis counseling, um,
Yeah.
or discipleship.
Cool, cool. All right, well, good job. All right, Heath, well, thanks for tuning in. Look forward to it.
All
One
right.
more time, if you want to go to Nashville for the Music City Grand Prix, there's the link and the banner there. He's the team leader, David Day, Will Dietrich. So click on the link or text me and I'll text it back to you. Heath, thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, see. Yeah, keep your finger in the text. I forgot to ask the question. We'll talk next week or something. But he's doing a great job, and it's really phenomenal watching everybody skills. I think the whole idea of becoming a better preacher seems to be something that may not be necessary, but ultimately it's just part of the growth of your faith. It's kind of a gift of laboring in this endeavor. And so I'll encourage you to check that out. Here's Heath's last. It was this morning, but if you are tuning in, he'll be there Thursday with Alex Burt, I believe, as well. So tune in. What's going on? Let's see. I was going to show something else. Hang on 1 second. We've had a couple last Mondays with Pastor Joe Kohler talking about the forgotten officer, really delving more deeply into the idea of basically involving the evangelist in the leadership of the church. That's basically what the premise is, and getting that. That's the premise right there. And there's a way to look at it, through 1 Timothy 3 and so forth, or Ephesians 4:11. But at the end of the day, it's really bringing the evangelist into the work leadership of the church and bringing that component to bear. He talked yesterday about how that's essentially what Apostle Paul did in the 20 churches in the Roman Empire. And in that process of establishing the churches, which were not that many, in the scope of the geographical area of the Roman Empire, he had all these pieces in it, and they were amazingly influential. I think that's what you're trying to get at, is how can the church be more influential, be more leavening, so forth and so on, things we want to see. And it is bringing the evangelist into the leadership of the church as an elder, as an overseer of these things, working in concert with the pastor, but having them as much a part of the leadership as possible. So there's still 2 more Mondays. So if you want to come in on Monday, next Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, send an email to info@sfoi.org, info@sfoi.org, and say, please register me for the Forgotten Officer teaching. In the fall as well as Circleville Pumpkin Festival. Joshua Richards is leading that as well. I want to encourage you to get these things on your calendar. Heath was there last year as a team leader, and there's a ton of people there. I think we have underestimated the numbers of people that come to some of these events, and so it's a huge event. So we're going back this year, October 18 to 21 as well. Joshua Richards led the Indy 500, did a great job there, had a bunch of folks there, and he's really getting involved there in Ohio. He's been in the Bell Center where he lives. He's preaching all over the place. He went up to Put-in Bay with Caleb Davenport the other day. So Joshua is a good team leader. Had a good crew there last year. 400,000 people were coming to Circleville, Ohio to look at pumpkins, believe it or not. But this is a great event as well. And one more for 2 years, and then we're going to start wrapping this up here, is this World Cup Soccer in 2026. Increasingly, like I was saying earlier about being in London, these events that come to a nation, come to a country, they're way beyond the scope of having a lot of people at a stadium. So FIFA runs this thing. FIFA, I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's the big international organization that runs a World Cup. If you think about it, FIFA can come into a nation. I saw them do this in South Africa in 2008 and 9, I believe it was, or 7 and 8. And they basically tell the nation, hey, you've got to build these stadiums. You have to come up to our code, so we'll come in there and put our event on. They have a lot of influence. And so FIFA's putting this on in concert with Mexico, United States, and Canada. It's only 16 stadiums. I'm looking for commitments now to basically organize and lead a team at the 16 stadiums here when the World Cup rolls into town. You can click on the link there. You can see it right there. And then let me know which one you'd like to take. And that would be ideal. I think this is going to be a really big deal in the United States. It's been here once before, but these guys are getting better and promoting at promoting these events. As I said earlier, Alex Burt is starting off the Sportsman 1000. I think he is going to be on Thursday, right, Heath, with Heath at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, talking about the Sportsman 1000, and then starting Thursdays at 8 p.m. Alex is going to have his Sportsman 1000 show on this. I want to put this in the chat thing here. Alex Burt was last year. Okay, I missed it. Great figures. All right, man. How'd it go? I gotta bring that up here. I was out of town. Anyway, Alex starts this Thursday. Ben Grady's this Thursday, right? 11:30. Ben Grady's going to be on his show 11:30 a.m. right Central Time. And so just click on wherever you're watching this. I guess you can arrange to get notifications, and they will alert you when that's on. All right, one more thing, we'll be done. We have waterproof Bibles. If you have one, don't have one. A waterproof Bible, if you've never seen it, it's really like a vinyl page here. That's what that is. You can pour water on it, get in the rain, and the rain doesn't smear the words. It's got a vinyl exterior, and so basically, I love it because you can treat it as you want to treat it versus the one Bible you have at home. So if you have one, we got the New King James, the KJV, and ESV as well. If you're looking for one, I think they're a valuable tool. We also have covers if you want to make it look more like a cover out there instead of just a Bible with a camouflage on the outside. The guy that originally made this, Bobby Barden down in Birmingham, he used it. They originally created it to be something you take when you camped out. So you have this kind of camp out look to it, but you get a cover for it, gives it a solid look. Love to do that. We also got backpacks as well. If you don't know these things, I'll put the links on here as well. It's very lightweight. It covers all of you put all your stuff here in back, your Bible, your tracts and amps and so forth as well. You sell amps as well. So really anything you need to get started out there as well, it's with us. And then I'm going to put a link on for Peter Salas. He sells some sports fan stuff, sort of like products, like a sweatshirt I'm wearing and cups. He can make a custom cup. You'll see that on there, which we took and put a team picture on the cup and then put the event on there. I really think that is pretty cool as something to remember the trip by. Let's see if that pops up here. Well, do you see that, Eve? Do you see it popping up? Anyway. I'm always, I cannot always overcome all the technological sophistication. On this page is a link also to store page. And if it does, it should show up on something that says it doesn't post comments to some destinations. I'm sure there's some reason. Anyway, friends, listen, thanks for tuning in. Tune in for Heath on, as he put here, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. He's on twice a week, same time, talking about keeping your finger in the text. He's interviewing Ben Grady this Thursday, talking about the Music City Grand Prix. And then Alex Burt will be on Thursday night at 8 p.m. talking about Sports Fan 1000. Thanks for tuning in. If you need something, give me a ring, 423-724-7500. Take care. See you soon.